Hi folks, I'm Sean Benstead with GND Media. I'm here with Andrew in sunny Greenwich to attend the Progressive Economy Forum, where we'll be travelling around all the different lecture theatres, fascinating discussions and seeing who we can find. Okay, so we're joined by Ann Pettifor, who has just talked us through a really thought-provoking session on Beyond the Green New Deal. Where does the financial system sit within the broader picture of global fossil capitalism?
So the key point is really to do with the price of energy at the moment and the price of grain. And both of these are determined by global markets beyond the reach of democratic sovereign governments. And the market also heavily influenced by speculation. So what's happening there is speculators are amplifying the price of oil and grain at the moment through the fact that, it is a global market beyond the reach of regulation, and that enables them to bet and gamble on whether it goes up half a cent or down another half a cent, and they can make millions out of that speculation. And they're imposing those prices and crisis on the whole world. And our governments are helpless in the face of that. It really is, what are we going to do about oil prices? What are we going to do about all? Are we all sitting there saying, oh, it's all awful? No. We have to tackle Wall Street and these big financial institutions. Now, how do we do that? For me, there is a simple, straightforward argument, and that is through capital controls, cross-border capital mobility. Governments have treated that as a kind of, something we can't discuss. But I want the left, and in particular the Green movement, to discuss that, because we have to get a grip on those markets, because those markets are fueling climate breakdown. Until we start managing them, we don't have to control them, but we have to manage them. There's no way of managing the ecological crisis.
When I was talking about the kind of shifting common sense, it's that the hegemony has cracked. So I would still say that neoliberalism is still highly influential across vast swathes of the public, but more importantly against some of those big institutions, the big powerful institutions, the financial institutions, the corporations and others. So it's not as if we've won the battle and it's like, hey, now we can all go home, we've won the argument. So the common sense position is shifting. We can see that with the fact that government seems almost sometimes double-headed in terms of it will do one thing. So for example, on the windfall tax, it's redistributing excess profits. But on the other hand, it will then hand a load of them in the small print to the fossil fuel companies with tax breaks. So what you understand is that they know the writing's on the wall for those issues, but they're still locked in to that neoliberal kind of hegemonic power structure because that's what they want, that's what they're part of, and that's who they represent. But what we're talking about, when we're talking about taking power, a state power, it isn't always progressive. So what we've got at the moment is a government that's trying to do all those things for people, trying to maintain, but it's also trying to maintain the power of the 1% and the relationship to power that they have. What we have to do is challenge that and ensure that it is the public, it is the 99%, it is the people and the institutions that we set up which can challenge their power and shift power away from them to us. And that's what progressive power shifting looks like. Completely the opposite of what this government is about.
So we've caught up with Matt Lawrence, Director of Commonwealth. So what is asset manager capitalism and what does it mean for environmental politics?
So asset manager capitalism is a new regime of ownership and control in our economy in which a small number of vast asset manager firms, the most famous of which is one called BlackRock, control more and more assets. So the big three, of which BlackRock is one of them, control roughly $20 trillion worth of assets globally. And they use that to vote in corporations, to engage with corporations, to sort of concentrate and distribute income and wealth in ways that drive inequality, which sort of support higher CEO pay, and I think most importantly for a Green New Deal, act in ways which sort of magnify the climate emergency and the injustices that lay beneath it.
So what kind of demand should the labour and climate movements be putting forward to undermine the power of asset manager capitalism?
So the first thing is the power of asset managers comes from their control of other people's money, often our money. So if you're saving into a pension, that will ultimately flow up to these companies which will invest and allocate that capital. So the first kind of basic step is to demand that we take back control of that money and say you can only use our money if you use it in a way which is pro-climate, which rapidly decarbonises justly as well. But the second step really is to sort of like try and not just work within the system but go beyond it. So to demand economic security for everyone, to demand like a planned transition, not just market-led, of how we decarbonise our economy. So that's about demanding much higher levels of public investment, public ownership of basic utilities and sort of infrastructures to sort of decarbonise, but also to democratise. And I think that requires not just a sort of like targeted campaign at financial markets, but a much more expansive sort of campaign that combines economic, social and racial justice together, which really is at the core of the Green New Deal.
So we bumped into Antonia Jennings, who's just been doing a talk on levelling up and community wealth building. So we're wondering if you can tell us a bit about what levelling up means in practice and how community wealth building provides an alternative.
So, the slogan's new, the badge is new, but the ambition actually has been there for a very long time. And actually, if you look at all the different iterations of solving regional inequality, they haven't really done much. So, of course, we need the agenda to be properly resourced, but it's also about the tactics to deliver that agenda and how we spend that money. In the early noughties, we had regional development agencies created under Blair. It was one of the biggest, perhaps, efforts to solve regional inequality. They were funded to the tune of £15 billion, and under Levelling Up so far, we've only seen £5 billion. And when it comes to how we do it, we need very much to set as the objectives improving sort of economic metrics that actually affect people's lives. We all know about the limits to growth, and actually so far what we've seen from the government around levelling up is an aspiration to promote growth or even to bring cities up to the standard of London. And actually, under closer inspection, London's economic model just crumbles. Whether you're looking at child poverty, levels of air pollution, carbon impact, whatever it might be, London comes out across a lot of these metrics as the worst. So we need to be both looking at what we're levelling up to, but also how we're doing it, and also ultimately how much we're funding it.
We're here at the very end of the Progressive Economy Forum after the plenary, which had Grace Blakeley and James Meadway and Ed Miliband. Grace, you talked about having to reimagine what we think the division between market and state is. Can you quickly kind of go over what you meant by that?
Yeah, so I kind of really started thinking about this question at the beginning of the pandemic when I saw all these headlines that were like, Boris does socialism. And I kept getting asked this when I went on the media, like, oh, clearly the Conservatives have implemented this entire agenda that you were behind. I just got really frustrated with that the misunderstanding around what socialism is, and equally around what capitalism is. Actually, capitalism is not this free market system where the market decides everything. It is this system comprised of a bunch of very powerful institutions based on social relations that are inherently unequal, whereby powerful individuals, institutions are able to make big decisions that affect everyone's lives without any democratic accountability whatsoever. So my argument is we need to kind of put aside this distinction between, politics and economics and start looking at the ways in which they feed into one another, look at the ways in which, public power is used to promote the interests of capital, which is what we've seen over the course of the pandemic, and look at the ways in which, kind of state intervention continues to kind of prop up the same kind of economic order, and then say, right, how do we conceive of democratizing the state, democratizing firms, democratizing the whole of society? So rather than thinking, taking power away from the market and giving it to the state, pulling power down from within all of these institutions. So putting power down from,
So is this looking at like worker co-ops and stuff like that, or are you trying to think of something outside that?
It's across the board. So when I talk about democratizing society, that's a huge, huge thing. And it comprises everything from kind of top-down policies that you would enact within the state. Could democratize the firm, democratize financial institutions, democratize politics, democratize international organizations even, and the policies that you would need to do that alongside fighting climate breakdown. So how do we kind of work within and outside political parties? How do we start actually building alternatives to the status quo right here and right now today? One of the most exciting things I found was these amazing examples of basically kind of local socialism. It's not a socialist economy that these people are operating in, but they are trying to build socialist relationships at the level of their communities, and the results of that are amazing. I think we've got a whole set of things to get done. We've got a long list.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thanks.